There's a moment many people describe to me, usually quietly, almost apologetically. You're sitting down, maybe in the evening, and you notice your feet don't quite feel like your feet anymore. They're there, but distant, heavy, sometimes cold, sometimes tingling, and you find yourself wondering if this is just what getting older feels like, or if something important is being missed. I'm Dr. Daniel Carter, and I've had conversations like this for many years. What stays with me is not the symptoms themselves, but the way you talk about them, the uncertainty, the hesitation to even bring it up. Many older adults tell me they didn't want to make a fuss. They thought, it's probably nothing, or everyone my age feels this way. But when you live with that numbness in your legs, or that subtle swelling around your ankles, it doesn't stay small. It follows you through the day. It changes how steady you feel when you stand up, how confident you are walking across a room. Sometimes it even changes how much you trust your own body. Often people describe a strange mix of sensations, a faint buzzing under the skin, a tightness in the calves by afternoon, shoes that feel fine in the morning but uncomfortable by evening, or a coolness in the feet that doesn't quite match the temperature of the room. None of these feel dramatic on their own, but together they create a quiet discomfort that's hard to explain to anyone else. What I've noticed over time is that many people assume these changes are sudden, that one day the legs simply stopped cooperating. But in many cases, these sensations build slowly, almost politely. They don't demand attention, they whisper, and that's part of what makes them confusing. You may have asked yourself why your legs feel heavier than they used to, even on days when you haven't done much, or why standing for a short while feels more tiring than it once did. Some people even say it feels as if the lower half of their body is always a step behind the rest of them. There's an important reason these feelings tend to show up in the legs and feet first. It's something many people are never clearly told. Not because it's dangerous to discuss, but because it's easy to overlook. The body changes how it moves things around as the years pass. Not abruptly, gradually, quietly. Research suggests that as we age, circulation in the lower body often becomes less efficient, not blocked, not broken, just slower, less responsive. And when that flow loses some of its rhythm, the legs are often the first to speak up, through sensations rather than pain. Many older adults I've spoken with describe it as a kind of dull fullness. Not exactly swelling, but not light either. Almost as if the legs are carrying more than they should. Others talk about pins and needles that come and go without warning. These experiences can feel unsettling, especially when no one has ever explained them in everyday language. What's rarely talked about is how much this affects your sense of independence. When your legs don't feel reliable, you start planning differently. You hesitate before long walks. You think twice about stairs. You become more careful, not because you're fearful, but because your body feels less predictable. And that loss of predictability can be emotionally tiring. I've also noticed something else. Many people believe that once these sensations appear, nothing can really be done except to live with it. That belief often settles in quietly, without being questioned. Yet in many cases, there are simple, gentle ways the body can be supported. Not forced, not fixed, but supported, in ways that are often overlooked. That idea alone can bring up curiosity. Why aren't these things talked about more openly? Why do so many people reach their 60s and 70s without ever hearing a clear human explanation of what they're feeling? You're not imagining these sensations, and you're not weak for noticing them. The body communicates differently with age. It uses subtler signals. Learning to recognize those signals doesn't mean something is wrong. Often, it simply means your body is asking to be understood in a new way. As you sit with this, it may help to notice how your legs feel at different moments of the day, not to judge them, just to observe. Awareness alone can sometimes shift how you relate to your body, from frustration to understanding. You don't need to rush to conclusions. There's no urgency here, just a quiet invitation to listen a little more closely to what your body has been trying to say, sometimes for longer than you realized. Over the years, I've noticed that when people finally begin talking about these sensations, there's often a sense of relief mixed with confusion. Relief because someone is finally listening. Confusion because they still don't quite understand why their legs feel so different from the rest of their body. Many older adults tell me something like this: my arms feel fine, my mind feels clear, but my legs feel older than the rest of me. That feeling can be unsettling. It creates a quiet disconnect, as if the lower half of your body is no longer fully in sync with who you are. In many cases, this isn't about damage or disease, it's about tempo. As the years pass, the natural flow through the legs often becomes slower and less responsive. Not stopped, just less lively. And when that happens, the body tends to express it through sensation rather than pain. You might notice that your feet feel colder even when the room is warm, or that you need a moment after standing before you feel steady. Some people describe a gentle pressure in the ankles by evening, almost like wearing invisible socks that are slightly too tight. These experiences are common, yet rarely explained in a way that feels reassuring. What's interesting is how adaptable the body still is, even later in life. Many people assume adaptability ends at a certain age, but research suggests the body continues responding to gentle support and daily rhythms far longer than most expect. It just responds differently than it did at 40. Often, what makes these leg sensations worse isn't one single factor. It's the accumulation of small things over time: long periods of sitting, shorter steps when walking, less variation in movement throughout the day. None of these are mistakes. They're natural shifts that happen quietly as life changes. I've met people who were surprised to realize how long they'd been sitting more than they thought. Not because they were inactive by choice, but because comfort gradually became a priority. Chairs felt better, standing felt less appealing. These adjustments make sense. They're part of listening to your body. But sometimes the body interprets stillness differently than we intend. When the legs stay still for long stretches, circulation can lose some of its natural rhythm. It's not something you feel immediately. It shows up later, in heaviness or tingling, or that subtle sense that your legs are slower to respond when you ask them to move. What's rarely acknowledged is the emotional layer beneath this. Many people feel frustrated with themselves. They think they should be stronger or more active. I want to be very clear here. There is no failure in this. These patterns develop gradually and quietly. They happen to people who have worked hard their entire lives. In my experience, what helps most is not pushing harder, but understanding more. When you begin to see these sensations as messages rather than problems, your relationship with your body can soften. The legs aren't betraying you, they're communicating in the only language they have. Some people notice that gentle changes in daily habits, not dramatic ones, can help support comfort and steadiness, not as treatments and not as guarantees, but as ways of reminding the body to keep things moving. Often, it's the consistency that matters more than intensity. What's curious is that many of these supportive approaches are simple enough to be done at home, quietly, without equipment or effort, and yet they're rarely discussed, perhaps because they seem too ordinary to matter. But the body often responds best to what feels natural rather than forced. I've seen many older adults regain a sense of confidence simply by feeling more connected to their legs again. Not because the sensations vanished completely, but because they felt more in tune with what their body needed day to day. As you listen to your own experience, you might start noticing patterns. Certain times of day when the heaviness is stronger, moments when warmth returns to your feet, small fluctuations that were always there but never fully noticed. These observations don't demand action, they simply build understanding. And understanding, especially later in life, can be deeply grounding. There's no expectation here, no pressure to change anything immediately, just an awareness that the body, even now, is still responsive, still listening, still capable of finding balance in gentle ways that often go unseen. There's something many people don't talk about, even though they feel it almost every day. It's the way uncertainty settles in when the body behaves differently than it used to. Not sharply, not dramatically, just enough to make you pause before moving. You may notice it when you rise from a chair and wait that extra second before taking a step, or when you hold on to a railing a little longer than before. These moments are rarely about fear, they're about trust. Trust between you and your body. When the legs feel numb, heavy, or slightly unsteady, that trust can quietly weaken. And what I've seen over many years is that this loss of confidence often affects quality of life more than the sensations themselves. You begin to limit movement not because you can't do it, but because you're not sure how your body will respond. Many older adults tell me they feel as though their legs wake up slowly. The first steps in the morning feel stiff. The feet feel distant from the floor. Then, gradually, sensation returns. That pattern is surprisingly common. It's another sign of how circulation and awareness in the lower body can change with time. Research suggests that gentle stimulation and regular movement can help support this connection between the brain and the legs, not in a medical sense, more in a conversational sense, reminding the body that it's still being used, still needed, still part of daily life. What's important here is the word gentle. The body at this stage doesn't respond well to being pushed or rushed. It responds to familiarity, repetition, calm signals that say, you're safe to move. I've noticed that people often expect improvement to feel dramatic, but when it comes to leg comfort and circulation, change is usually subtle. It might show up as slightly warmer feet in the evening, or less swelling at the end of the day, or a feeling that walking feels smoother, even if you can't quite explain why. These small shifts matter more than they seem. They can restore a sense of stability that supports independence, the confidence to move around your home without constant second guessing. There's also an emotional aspect that's often overlooked. When the body feels heavy or sluggish, the mind can mirror that feeling. Fatigue becomes more noticeable. Motivation dips, not because you're losing energy, but because your body feels harder to manage. Many people blame themselves for this. They think they've become lazy or less disciplined. In reality, they're responding to physical feedback. The body is asking for a different pace, not less engagement. I've spoken with individuals who felt embarrassed mentioning tingling or swelling, as if those symptoms were trivial. But these sensations matter because they influence how you move through your day. They shape your choices in quiet ways. When you begin to recognize that these changes are common and not personal failings, something often shifts emotionally. There's less self criticism, more patience, and patience can be surprisingly powerful. In many cases, supporting circulation isn't about doing more, it's about allowing movement to return naturally into daily routines. Small moments of standing, gentle shifts of position, simple awareness of how long you've been still. These aren't instructions, they're observations of patterns that seem to help many people feel more connected to their legs again. It's interesting how often people say, I didn't realize how disconnected my legs felt until they started feeling a little more present. That sense of presence, of being grounded in your body, can restore confidence more than any measurement ever could. You may notice that when your legs feel lighter, your posture changes. Your breathing softens. Even your mood can lift slightly. These changes are rarely dramatic, but they accumulate. Nothing here is about fixing something broken. It's about supporting something that's still very much alive, still responsive, even if it speaks more quietly now. As you reflect on your own experience, you might begin to see your body not as something that's declining, but as something adapting. Adaptation isn't weakness, it's wisdom built over time. And sometimes, simply understanding that can ease more tension than you expect. There's a moment many people describe to me later, often after they've spent some time simply paying attention to how their body feels. They say it's not that everything suddenly changed, it's that they stopped feeling at odds with their own legs. That shift may sound small, but it can be deeply meaningful. When the legs feel swollen, cold, or heavy, it's easy to feel disconnected from them, almost as if they belong to someone else. Over time, that disconnect can create quiet frustration. You may feel older than you are, slower than you want to be, and that feeling can settle in even on days when you're otherwise doing well. Many older adults I've spoken with describe evenings as the hardest time. By then, the legs feel fuller, shoes come off with relief, ankles may look different than they did in the morning. There's often a sense of gravity pulling downward, as if everything is gathered in the lower body. This experience is very common, and yet rarely explained in a comforting way. In many cases, it reflects how the body responds to a full day of being upright. As circulation slows with age, the legs often carry more of that burden. It's not a failure. It's simply how the body adapts to time and gravity. What's often overlooked is how responsive the body still is to kindness. Not force, not pressure, kindness. When the body feels supported rather than criticized, it often responds in subtle but meaningful ways. Some people notice that warmth returns more easily to their feet when they feel relaxed. Others notice less tightness when they allow themselves moments of rest without guilt. These observations aren't guarantees, they're patterns seen again and again. I've also noticed how reassurance alone can make a difference. When people understand that these sensations are common and gradual, the anxiety around them often softens. And when anxiety eases, the body sometimes follows. There's a quiet cycle between the nervous system and circulation. When worry tightens the body, sensations often feel stronger. When calm returns, the body tends to settle. This isn't about control, it's about relationship. Many older adults carry years of responsibility, resilience, and self reliance. You've spent much of your life pushing through discomfort without complaint. But later in life, the body sometimes asks for a different approach, not endurance, but attentiveness. This doesn't mean giving up independence. In fact, it often supports it. When you feel more connected to your legs, walking feels less uncertain. Balance feels more trustworthy. You move not faster, but with greater confidence. That confidence can quietly restore freedom in everyday life, moving around your home, stepping outside, standing without hesitation. None of this happens all at once, and it doesn't need to. What matters is the understanding that the body hasn't stopped communicating with you. It's simply changed the way it speaks. Sensations like tingling, heaviness, or swelling are not warnings of failure. They're signals asking for awareness. You don't need to judge them. You don't need to fight them. Just noticing them with patience can be enough to begin a different relationship with your body. As we grow older, health is less about perfection and more about harmony, about finding a rhythm that supports steadiness, comfort, and dignity. You've lived long enough to know that meaningful change is often quiet. It arrives gradually, it doesn't announce itself. And sometimes it begins simply by listening, not with fear, but with understanding, to what your body has been trying to tell you all along. As this conversation settles, I want you to know something important. Nothing you felt in your legs makes you fragile. Nothing about these changes means you're losing yourself. What you're experiencing is something many people encounter as the body learns a slower, quieter way of functioning. With age, the body doesn't stop working, it renegotiates. It chooses efficiency differently, and sometimes that negotiation shows up as sensations that are unfamiliar: heaviness, tingling, swelling, or a sense that your legs need more time than they once did. That can be unsettling, especially in a world that rarely speaks gently about aging. But I've seen again and again that when people stop seeing these changes as enemies, something softens, not just physically, but emotionally. The tension eases, the constant self monitoring relaxes. And when that happens, many people begin to feel steadier, not because everything disappears, but because they feel more at home in their body again. There's a quiet strength in that. You may not notice dramatic shifts from one day to the next. That's normal. The body at this stage responds more like a conversation than a command. It listens over time, it adjusts gradually, and it often responds best when it feels respected rather than pushed. Many older adults tell me that what matters most isn't perfect comfort, but predictability, knowing how their body tends to feel, understanding its rhythms, feeling less surprised by it. That understanding alone can restore a sense of control that had quietly faded. Independence doesn't always come from doing more. Sometimes it comes from feeling steadier, doing what you already do, walking across a room without hesitation, standing with a little more confidence, trusting your footing. These are small moments, but they shape daily life more than we realize. If you ever find yourself wondering whether these sensations mean something is wrong, it may help to remember this. The body rarely changes suddenly without reason. Most age related shifts are slow, layered, and deeply human. They reflect a lifetime of movement, work, and adaptation. There is no failure in that. You don't need to chase youth. You don't need to force your body back to what it once was. What matters now is supporting what it is: steady, experienced, and still capable of balance. As you go on with your day, you might simply carry a little more awareness with you. Not worry, just awareness. How your legs feel when you stand, how they respond when you move, how they settle when you rest. Nothing to fix, nothing to prove. Just a quiet understanding that your body is still communicating, and that listening, gently and without judgment, can be one of the most supportive things you do for yourself. Sometimes that alone is enough to help you feel a little more grounded, a little more secure, and a little more at peace in the body that has carried you through so much.